I never told my son and his fiancée about my $42,000 per month salary. He always saw me living simply. I was invited to their pre-wedding dinner with his fiancée's rich parents. I wanted to see how they would treat a poor person by pretending to be a ruined and naive woman. What happened after that night almost broke my family. Hello and welcome. Happy to have you here. I'd like to know where you are listening from. Kindly comment the name of your city. Okay. Let's go into the story. I was folding my Walmart cardigan, the beige one with the pulled thread at the collar, when the text came through. Emily, dinner Tuesday 7 p.m. My parents' club. Please dress nicely. Not hi mom. Not hope you can make it. Just instructions, like I was staff. I set the phone face down on my kitchen counter. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of my 15-year-old refrigerator. I'd bought it used. It still worked fine. I read the message again. Then once more. Not because I didn't understand what it said, but because of what it didn't say. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. I expected them to shake. Instead, I felt something else. A kind of stillness that settles over you when you realize a suspicion you've been ignoring has just confirmed itself. Like when you find a lump and know, even before the doctor speaks, what it means. I sat down at my small kitchen table, the one I'd bought at an estate sale 20 years ago, and placed both palms flat against the wood. Dress nicely. As if I wouldn't know to dress appropriately for a pre-wedding dinner with my future daughter-in-law's parents. As if I needed to be reminded that I'd be representing my son in front of people who mattered. Or maybe, and this was the thought that made me close my eyes, as if she was already. This wasn't the first time. 6 months earlier, when John first told me he was dating someone seriously, he'd been excited. Nervous excited, the way he used to be before piano recitals as a boy. He'd taken me to lunch, a diner, nothing fancy, the kind of place we'd always gone, and told me about Emily. She's amazing, Mom. She works in marketing for her dad's firm. She's smart, she's driven, she went to Cornell. He'd kept talking, but I'd already heard what mattered. Her dad's firm. Not a firm. Not she works in marketing. Her father owned it. I can't wait for you to meet her, he'd said. I met her 3 weeks later. Emily had been polite. Warm, even. She'd asked me questions about my work. I told her I did financial consulting, which was true in the vaguest sense, and she'd seemed genuinely interested when I talked about John's childhood. But I noticed the way her eyes moved. Over my JCPenney blouse. Over my worn purse. Over the small silver earrings I'd worn for 20 years. Not judgment, exactly. More like calculation. Like she was placing me on a grid in her mind, determining where I fit in the world she knew. When the check came, Emily reached for it immediately. Oh, please, I've got this, she'd said, smiling at me. John hadn't even reached for his wallet. That's so generous of you, I'd said. Thank you. What I didn't say, I'd planned to pay. I'd brought cash specifically to cover lunch for all 3 of us. I'd made $42,000 that month alone, a slower month than usual, but neither of them knew that. They saw my 12-year-old Honda Civic in the parking lot and assumed they knew my story. I let them. The exclusion started small. When John and Emily got engaged 2 months later, the announcement was posted on social media before I received a call. I found out from my neighbor, who'd seen it on Facebook. Congratulations, Carol had said, beaming over the fence. Your son's getting married. I'd smiled. Yes. I'm so happy for them. Then I'd gone inside and waited 3 hours before John finally called. Mom. Did you see? I proposed. I did see, honey. Congratulations. I'm so thrilled for you both. We're thinking a spring wedding. Emily's already got ideas. Her mom's super involved, she knows all these vendors and venues. It's going to be incredible. That sounds wonderful. We'll keep you posted on everything. Except they didn't. The venue was chosen without my input. The date was set without asking if it conflicted with anything on my calendar. It didn't, but they didn't ask. The guest list was compiled, and when I finally saw it, I recognized exactly 3 names besides my own. My sister. My brother. My mother, who was 91 and in assisted living. None of my friends. None of my colleagues. No one from the life I'd built over 6 decades. When I gently mentioned this to John, he'd seemed surprised. Oh. I mean, Emily's family is pretty big, and the venue has a cap. We're trying to keep it intimate. Intimate. 240 people. Just not intimate enough for anyone I knew. Of course, I'd said. I understand. I didn't push. I never pushed. That wasn't who I'd raised him to be, and it wasn't who I was. But I noticed. I noticed when Emily started calling me Melissa instead of using any variation of Mom. I noticed when John stopped calling as frequently. I noticed when holiday plans shifted from "we'll come to you" to "we're doing Emily's family this year, her parents have that big house, you know." I noticed when John casually mentioned that Emily's parents had offered to pay for the wedding, the whole thing, no expense spared, and how grateful he was. That's incredibly generous of them, I'd said. They really are. Emily's dad, Richard, he keeps saying he wants the best for his little girl. I'm so lucky to be joining this family. Joining this family. Not creating a family. Not bringing our families together. Joining theirs. Still, I helped. When John mentioned he and Emily needed furniture for their new apartment, I'd sent a check. $1,500. It was nothing to me, but I wrote it carefully on a check from my nearly empty personal account, the one I kept for exactly these purposes, and mailed it with a card. When Emily mentioned she was stressed about work and wedding planning, I'd offered to help with anything she needed. She'd thanked me but never followed up. When John asked if I could help with the wedding favors, assembling 300 small boxes with ribbons, I'd said yes immediately and spent 3 weekends at my kitchen table, tying bows until my fingers cramped. "You're a lifesaver, Mom," John had said when he picked them up. Emily had inspected them, nodded, and said, "These look good. Very handmade." Very handmade. I'd smiled. I'm glad they work. What I'd wanted to say, I'd paid someone $15,000 the year before to hand-letter 250 invitations for a charity gala I'd chaired. I knew what handmade meant in her world versus mine. But I said nothing. The breaking point, or what should have been the breaking point, came 3 months before the wedding. John called on a Thursday evening. I was working late, reviewing a complex acquisition deal for a client, 3 monitors glowing in my small home office. "Hey, Mom. Quick question. Emily and I were wondering, would you be okay sitting with Grandma during the ceremony?" I stopped typing. Sitting with Grandma. Yeah, you know, she needs someone with her, and we thought it might be nice for you two to be together. Emily's family is all in the wedding party, so. I understood immediately. Emily's parents would sit in the front row. Emily's siblings, her aunts, her uncles, her cousins, all arranged prominently, visibly, as befitting the family hosting and funding this event. And me? I'd be tucked away with my elderly mother, out of the way, minimized, necessary but not celebrated. Of course, I'd said. I'd be happy to sit with Grandma. Thanks, Mom. You're the best. After we hung up, I'd sat in the dark for 20 minutes. Then I'd gone back to work. The deal I was reviewing was worth $800 million. My fee would be $400,000. My son wanted me to sit in the back. I let him. That's when something began to shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. but a question, forming slowly, like ice crystals building on a window. What exactly do they think of me? I knew John loved me. I'd never doubted that. He was a good son, attentive in his way, affectionate, proud of how I'd raised him alone after his father left when he was 2. But Emily was different. Emily had been raised in a world where money was visible, where wealth was displayed, where your worth was measured by your zip code, your car, your clothes, your club membership. I'd chosen to live differently. After my career took off in my 30s, after I'd made my first million, then my first 5 million, then more than I'd ever expected to make in a lifetime, I'd made a decision. I would not let money change how I lived. I'd stayed in my modest apartment. I'd driven reliable cars until they died. I'd shopped sales and clipped coupons and packed lunches and done all the things I'd done when I was actually struggling, because those habits kept me grounded. And because I'd wanted John to grow up normal. Not spoiled. Not entitled. Not dependent. He'd gone to public school. He'd had a part-time job in high school. He'd taken out student loans for college. I could have paid, but I'd wanted him to understand the value of education, of work, of earning something yourself. He'd grown up to be a good man. But now, looking at how he let Emily treat me, how he let her family eclipse me, how he seemed almost apologetic about my existence, I wondered if I'd miscalculated. The text from Emily came 4 days later. Emily, dinner Tuesday 7 p.m. My parents' club. Please dress nicely. And sitting there at my kitchen table, that question that had been forming finally crystallized into something sharp and clear. What would happen if they thought I was exactly who they already suspect I am? Not a woman who'd chosen simplicity, but a woman who had no choice at all. What if I wasn't modest? What if I was poor? What if I wasn't financially independent? What if I was barely scraping by? What if I wasn't choosing to live below my means? What if I had no means at all? How would they treat me then? How would Emily's wealthy parents react to their future son-in-law's struggling mother? How would Emily herself behave? And, this was the question that made my chest tighten, how would John respond? I picked up my phone and typed a response. Me, I'll be there. Thank you for including me. Then I stood up and walked to my bedroom closet. Past the simple clothes I wore daily. Past the department store dresses and sensible shoes. To the back corner, where a garment bag hung untouched. Inside was the outfit I'd worn to my mother's 80th birthday party. A JCPenney dress, polyester blend, 12 years old. It had a stain on the hem that had never quite come out. I pulled it out and laid it on my bed. Then I went to my dresser and found my oldest purse. Vinyl, peeling at the corners, bought from a discount store in 2008. I laid that beside the dress. Then I sat down and began to plan. Not revenge. Not yet. Just a test. A simple test to see who my son had become, and who the woman he loved really was when she thought no one important was watching. I had 5 days. The Riverside Country Club sat on 40 acres of manicured perfection overlooking the water. I'd driven past it 1,000 times. I'd even been inside twice, once for a client meeting, once for a charity function where I'd written a check for $50,000 under my consulting firm's name. But I'd never been there as Melissa Cooper, struggling mother. Tuesday arrived cool and clear. I spent the afternoon preparing. I wore the old dress. The stain on the hem was visible if you looked, and I knew Emily would look. I wore nude pantyhose with a small run near the ankle that I'd carefully made larger with my fingernail. My shoes were black flats from Payless, scuffed at the toes, heels worn down on one side. The purse was perfect. Vinyl peeling, brass clasp tarnished, the strap held together with a safety pin I'd added that morning. I did my makeup carefully, not too much, not too little. Drugstore foundation that didn't quite match my skin tone. Lipstick in a shade that had been popular in 2005. Then I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked exactly like what I intended, a 65-year-old woman who was trying her very best with very little. Someone to pity. Someone to dismiss. Someone whose opinion wouldn't matter when wedding decisions were being made. I took off my everyday watch, a simple Timex, and replaced it with nothing. I removed my small silver earrings and left my ears bare. I took off the thin gold chain I'd worn for 30 years. Then I drove my Honda Civic to the country club, parking far from the entrance, and walked across the lot with my peeling purse clutched against my side. The hostess looked at me the way service workers do when they're trying to determine if you belong. "I'm meeting the Morrison party," I said quietly. Her expression shifted to something carefully neutral. "Of course. Right this way." Emily's family was already seated when I arrived. The table was by the window, prime placement, and I could see them from across the dining room. John and Emily sat on one side. Across from them, Emily's parents, Richard and Patricia Morrison. Richard wore a navy blazer and an expression of permanent satisfaction. Patricia wore pearls and cream-colored silk. They all looked up as I approached. Emily's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "Melissa." John stood up immediately, coming around to hug me. "You made it." "Of course, sweetheart." I hugged him back, then turned to the table. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I had trouble finding parking." "You should have used the valet," Patricia said, her voice bright but her eyes already cataloging every detail of my appearance. "Oh, I didn't want to bother with that," I said, sliding into the chair John held out for me. "This is such a beautiful place. Thank you for having me." Richard extended his hand across the table. His handshake was firm, practiced, the kind that came from 40 years of business deals. "Melissa. Finally. We've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope." I smiled. "John's told us how you raised him on your own," Patricia said. "That must have been so difficult." There it was. The first probe. "It had its challenges," I said carefully. "But we managed. John was such a good kid. Made it easier." "I'm sure," Patricia said. "Emily tells me you work in consulting?" The way she said consulting made it sound like a euphemism for unemployment. "Yes, financial consulting. Small clients, mostly. Local businesses that need help with bookkeeping, taxes, that sort of thing." I watched Emily and Patricia exchange a glance. Quick, subtle, but I caught it. John was reading his menu, oblivious. "That sounds helpful," Richard said. "Small business is the backbone of America." It was a dismissal wrapped in patriotism. The waiter arrived, and I watched as Richard ordered for the table, appetizers for everyone, wine, specific preparations. No one objected. This was clearly how things worked in their world. When the appetizers came, Patricia leaned forward slightly. "So Melissa, John mentioned you live in Riverside Commons?" Riverside Commons was a perfectly acceptable apartment complex. Not fancy, not terrible. Lower middle class, if you were categorizing. "Yes, I'd been there about 20 years now." 20 years in the same apartment, Patricia repeated, as if I'd said I lived in a cardboard box. "You must be very settled." "It's home," I said simply. "Have you ever thought about buying?" Richard asked. "The market's been good. Even small condos have appreciated nicely." "I've thought about it," I said. "But you know how it is. On a fixed income, it's hard to save for a down payment." Fixed income. I watched those words land. Emily reached for her wine glass. John was buttering bread, still not paying attention to the undercurrent swirling around the table. "Of course," Patricia said smoothly. "Well, renting certainly has its advantages. No maintenance costs, no property taxes. Very practical." The appetizers were excellent. I ate slowly, carefully, the way someone does when they're used to making food stretch. Richard turned his attention to John. So, son. How's the job search going? John had been laid off 6 weeks earlier. I knew because he'd called me, stressed and worried. I'd told him something would come along. What I hadn't told him, I had connections at 17 companies in this city who would hire him with one phone call from me. It's going, John said. Got a few leads. Nothing concrete yet. These things take time, Richard said. But don't worry. I've got some people I can reach out to. Get your resume in front of the right folks. That would be amazing, John said, relief flooding his face. Thank you, Richard. That's what family's for, Richard said, smiling broadly. Then he glanced at me. I imagine Melissa would help if she could. The implication was clear, but she can't. I would if I had those kinds of connections, I said, meeting his eyes. But my world is a little smaller than yours. Nothing wrong with that, Richard said expansively. We all play to our strengths. The main courses arrived. Filet mignon for Richard, sea bass for Patricia, salmon for Emily. John had ordered the ribeye. I'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, chicken breast with vegetables. Is that all you're having? Patricia asked, her tone dripping with concern. It's plenty, I said. I'm not as hungry as I thought. You should have ordered what you wanted, Emily said. This is a celebration. This is perfect, really. The conversation moved on. Richard talked about a recent trip to Napa. Patricia discussed the wedding venue. Apparently they'd secured an additional terrace for cocktail hour, bringing the total cost to what I knew was around $200,000. We're sparing no expense, Patricia said, smiling at John. Emily's our only daughter. We want this to be perfect. We're so grateful, John said, reaching for Emily's hand. Right, Mom? It's incredibly generous, I said. I wish I could contribute more, but... Oh, don't even think about it, Patricia interrupted. We know raising John alone was expensive. You did your part. Did my part. Past tense. As if my role was complete. I did send that check a few months ago, I said quietly. For the furniture? That was so sweet of you, Emily said. We used it for decorative pillows. $1,500. 4 throw pillows. John shifted uncomfortably. I thought we were going to use that for the... The pillows were important, Emily said firmly. Then she turned to me. They really tie the living room together. Very cozy. Richard cleared his throat. Patricia, tell them about the honeymoon. Oh. Patricia brightened. We're gifting them 2 weeks in Italy. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, the works. All expenses paid. That's... I paused, letting my voice crack slightly. That's the most wonderful gift. They deserve it, Patricia said. Young couples today have it so hard. Student loans, rent, trying to get established. It's not like when we were young, when you could buy a house on a single income. No, I agreed. It's not. But what I didn't say, I'd bought my first investment property on a single income. At 28. While raising a toddler alone. Which reminds me, Richard said, turning to John. Have you two thought about where you'll settle long-term? That apartment's fine for now, but once kids come. We're thinking about Westchester, Emily said. My parents have offered to help with a down payment when we're ready. Maybe 40, 50,000, Richard said. Get you into something decent. John looked overwhelmed. That's... I don't know what to say. Say you'll give us beautiful grandchildren, Patricia laughed. Everyone laughed. Except me. I smiled, but inside, something cold was crystallizing. They were building a life for John. A life where he depended on them. Where every major decision would be influenced by their money, their connections, their approval. Where I was peripheral at best. What about you, Melissa? Patricia asked suddenly. Any advice for the newlyweds? Everyone looked at me. I took a sip of water, I declined the wine, and set down my glass carefully. Just that marriage is about partnership, I said. About building something together. Not about what you start with, but what you create. Wise words, Richard said, in a tone that suggested they weren't. Dessert arrived. Crème brûlée, chocolate torte, fruit tart. I declined. Are you sure? Emily asked. They're really good here. I'm watching my sugar, I said. Doctor's orders. Another glance between Emily and her mother. Another data point confirming what they already believed: I was struggling, aging, irrelevant. Coffee came. Richard launched into a story about golf. Patricia showed Emily pictures on her phone, wedding dress options, floral arrangements, tablescapes. John listened, contributed, laughed at his future father-in-law's jokes. And I sat there, invisible. Not once during the entire dinner did anyone ask me about my life beyond surface pleasantries. Not once did anyone ask if I was dating, if I had hobbies, if I had friends, if I had dreams. Not once did anyone treat me like a person with a full, rich existence beyond being John's mother. I was a box they were checking. A courtesy they were extending. And John, my beautiful, kind, oblivious son, didn't notice. When the check came, Richard grabbed it immediately. This is on me, he announced. Thank you so much, I said. This was lovely. Our pleasure, Patricia said. We should do this more often. It's important for family to spend time together. We all stood. There were hugs, handshakes, promises to coordinate about the wedding. John walked me to my car. Thanks for coming, Mom, he said. I know Emily's parents can be a lot, but they're really great once you get to know them. They seem very nice, I said. And thanks for, understanding about everything. The wedding stuff, I mean. I know it's mostly Emily's family handling things, but they're just really involved. It's fine, sweetheart. You're the best. He hugged me hard. I'll call you this week, okay? Okay. I watched him walk back toward the entrance, where Emily waited under the lights. Then I sat in my car in the dark parking lot and looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They weren't shaking. They were steady. Because I'd gotten my answer. I'd seen exactly who they thought I was. And I'd seen how they treated someone they perceived as less than them. With pity. With dismissal. With patronizing kindness that barely masked contempt. And John had let it happen. I started my car and drove home slowly. When I got to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat in the dark and thought about what came next. Because something had changed during that dinner. Not anger. Not sadness. Clarity. I turned on one lamp and sat at my kitchen table. The apartment was quiet. Outside, I could hear traffic, the distant sound of a siren, the ordinary noises of a Tuesday night. I didn't call anyone. I didn't cry. I didn't pour a glass of wine and rage about injustice. Instead, I opened my laptop. My real laptop. Not the old one I kept visible on my desk for show, but the custom-built machine I used for actual work, secured with encryption that would make a military contractor jealous. I logged into my accounts. Checking account, personal, $8,347. This was the one I let John know about, the one I paid bills from, the one that matched the life I showed the world. Checking account, business, $427,000. Current operating capital for my consulting firm. Investment accounts, $34.2 million. Diversified portfolio, conservative growth, managed by a team in New York who knew me only as M. Cooper. Real estate holdings, $8.7 million. For rental properties in 3 states, all managed through an LLC. Retirement accounts, $12.3 million. Total liquid net worth, approximately $55.4 million. I'd built this over 40 years. Slowly. Carefully. Through smart investments, strategic consulting work, and living well below my means. I'd never told John. When he was young, I'd thought it would spoil him. When he got older, I'd thought it would change how he saw me, how he saw himself. I'd wanted him to build his own life, not wait for mine to become his. But sitting there, looking at these numbers, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. Because my son was about to marry into a family that measured worth in dollars. And they'd measured me and found me wanting. Not because I was actually poor. But because they thought I was poor, and that was enough to make me irrelevant. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, thinking. Wednesday morning, I didn't call John. I called my attorney. Stephen Pritchard had handled my legal affairs for 20 years. He knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. He'd helped me structure my LLCs, reviewed contracts, guided estate planning. Melissa, he said warmly. What can I do for you? I need to update my will, I said. Of course. What changes are you thinking about? I want to establish a trust. With conditions. There was a pause. Stephen was too professional to ask why, but I could hear the question in his silence. Walk me through what you have in mind, he said. I explained. Not everything. Not the dinner, not the test, not the year of small exclusions. Just the framework. A trust for John. Structured to vest over time. With conditions about financial independence, about understanding the value of money, about not being controlled by wealth, his or anyone else's. This is complex, Stephen said carefully. And if you don't mind me saying, very different from what we discussed last time. I know. Is everything all right? Everything is clear, I said. That's different from all right, but it's better. When do you want to implement this? After the wedding, I said. But I want the documents prepared now. I'll have something for you to review by Monday. Thank you, Stephen. After I hung up, I made my second call. Margaret Chen was a financial advisor at Wells Fargo Private Bank. I'd met her through a professional network 5 years earlier. She handled accounts for clients with net worth over 10 million. Melissa. It's been too long. How are you? I'm well. Margaret, I need advice on something sensitive. I'm listening. If someone wanted to, let's say, create financial independence for a family member, but also wanted to ensure that family member understood the responsibility that came with it, what structures would you recommend? We talked for 45 minutes. Margaret suggested several options: graduated trusts, educational requirements, mandatory financial counseling, philanthropic components. The goal, she said, is to make sure the money serves them, not controls them. And that they understand it as a tool, not an identity. Exactly. Are we talking about your son? We are. Is he getting married? I seem to remember you mentioning something about that. In 6 weeks. And does he know about your financial situation? No. Another pause. Margaret was too tactful to comment. When will you tell him? After, I said. After he's made his choices. That's an interesting approach. I want to know who he is, I said quietly. Without this. Without the influence of what he thinks I can give him. And what if he's not who you hope he is? I looked at my hands. Still steady. Then the trust will help him become that person, I said. Or it won't vest at all. I didn't call John that week. He called me Friday afternoon. Hey Mom. Just checking in. How are you? I'm good, honey. How are you? Busy. Wedding stuff, job interviews. Emily's mom has been amazing, she's connecting me with everyone. I have 3 interviews next week. That's wonderful. Yeah. Richard knows everybody. It's kind of insane. He paused. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something. My chest tightened. What is it? So, Emily and I were thinking, for the wedding party entrance, they do this thing where they announce everyone's name and occupation. You know, John Smith, investment banker, that kind of thing. Okay. And we were wondering what you'd want us to say? For you? When they announce the mother of the groom? I understood immediately. They didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound small. Compared to Patricia Morrison's introduction, which would probably include every board she sat on and every charity she chaired. You can just say my name, I said. Melissa Cooper. Are you sure? We could say consultant or. Just my name is fine. Okay. If you're comfortable with that. Comfortable. As if I should be embarrassed. I'm comfortable, I said. After we hung up, I sat very still. Then I made another call. Jessica, it's Melissa. Jessica Torres was the director of the Riverside Women's Foundation, a nonprofit I'd quietly funded for a decade. My consulting firm was their largest anonymous donor. We'd given $2.3 million over the years. Melissa. What a nice surprise. What can I do for you? I'm considering making my support more public, I said. There was a sharp intake of breath. Really? That would be incredible. Having your name attached to our work would open so many doors. I'm not decided yet. But if I did, what would that look like? Well, at your giving level, you'd be a founding patron. We'd invite you to join the board, of course. Your name would be on the main hall. We've been planning that renovation you funded. Press releases, public recognition at our annual gala. The gala is in May? Yes, May 15th. It's our biggest event of the year. 500 guests, major donors, city council members, local press. If you were there as a public patron rather than anonymous. Let me think about it, I said. Of course. But Melissa, we'd be honored. What you've done for us, for the women we serve, it's extraordinary. After that call, I made 6 more. To the Children's Hospital where I'd endowed a wing. To the scholarship fund I'd established at the State University. To the small business incubator I'd been bankrolling for 8 years. To the arts center that had named a gallery after my mother, though they thought it was funded by a family trust, not by me personally. Each call was the same conversation. What would happen if I went public? By Friday evening, I had my answer. I'd be one of the most recognized philanthropists in the city. The kind of person Patricia Morrison would want to impress. The kind of person Richard Morrison would want to network with. The kind of person Emily would want in her wedding photos. But I didn't make those announcements. Not yet. The wedding rehearsal was scheduled for Thursday evening, 5 days before the ceremony. I drove to the venue, an estate that had once belonged to a railroad baron, now rented out for events that cost more than most people's annual salary. I wore my simple navy dress. My old purse. My scuffed flats. Emily's family was already there. So was the wedding planner, the photographer, the coordinator, and what appeared to be half of Emily's extended family. I was directed to sit with my mother, who'd been brought from her assisted living facility in a medical transport van. Melissa, she said, confused. Where are we? John's wedding rehearsal, Mom. John's getting married? Yes, Mom. That's nice. She patted my hand. The rehearsal began. The wedding party practiced their processional. Emily's father would walk her down the aisle. Emily's mother would be escorted by Emily's brother. The bridesmaids, 5 of them, would enter in order of height. John's best man was his college roommate. I would enter alone, be seated, and then stand when the bride entered. Standard. Appropriate. Invisible. Afterward, there was a dinner. Not at the venue, at the Morrison house. Just family, Patricia had said. I wasn't invited. Mom, I'm sorry, John said, pulling me aside. It's just immediate family tonight. We'll see you at the ceremony, okay? Of course, honey. You understand, right? I do. I watched them all pile into cars, laughing, taking photos, disappearing down the long driveway toward a family dinner I wasn't part of. Then I drove my mother back to her facility, got her settled, and went home, where I made one final call. Stephen, it's Melissa. Are the documents ready? They are. Do you want me to courier them over? No. I'll come to your office Monday morning. I want to review everything before I sign. Understood. Melissa, are you sure about this? I thought about that dinner at the country club. About being told where to sit at my son's wedding. About $1,500 spent on throw pillows while they spent $200,000 on a party. About John calling Richard's connections amazing while never asking if I had any. About being introduced with just my name, as if I'd accomplished nothing worth mentioning. I'm sure, I said. All right then. I'll see you Monday. I hung up and walked to my window. My apartment overlooked a parking lot and a strip mall. Nothing glamorous. Nothing impressive. But it was mine. Bought and paid for years ago. Kept intentionally humble. In 6 days, John would get married. In 6 days, he'd make his choice about what kind of man he wanted to be. And the day after that, he'd learn who his mother actually was. Whether he was ready for it or not. The day arrived bright and clear. I wore my best dress, still department store, still modest, but pressed and clean. I did my makeup carefully. I wore my mother's old pearl earrings, the only jewelry I owned that had any real value, though no one looking at them would know. I arrived early to help my mother from the medical transport. Is this a party? She asked. It's John's wedding, Mom. John. She smiled vaguely. He was such a sweet baby. I got her settled in the back row, our assigned seats, and waited. The venue filled with guests. I recognized almost no one. Emily's side of the church was packed, hundreds of people in expensive clothes, greeting each other with the easy familiarity of shared country clubs and charity boards. My side held my mother, my sister, my brother, and 3 of my mother's old friends from her nursing home. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily looked stunning. John looked happier than I'd ever seen him. When they said their vows, my chest ached, not with sadness, but with something more complex. Love for my son. Grief for what we'd lost. Hope for what might still be saved. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, silk drapes, flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I sat at a table near the back with my family. Not at the head table. Not even close. Richard gave a toast about welcoming John into their family. Patricia gave a toast about Emily finding her perfect match. Emily's brother gave a toast about childhood memories. No one invited me to speak. John didn't notice, or didn't think to ask. I sat quietly, eating my plated dinner, watching my son dance with his bride, with his new mother-in-law, with his future. And I felt, for the first time, completely at peace with what I was about to do. Sunday morning, I called John. Hey Mom. He sounded exhausted and euphoric. How are you? I'm well. Do you have time to meet for coffee? Just the 2 of us? Yeah, I think so. Em's still sleeping. She's exhausted. The wedding was incredible, wasn't it? It was beautiful. How about that diner on 5th? The one we used to go to? Sure. Give me an hour? Perfect. I arrived first and ordered coffee. When John walked in, still glowing from yesterday, I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. Then I remembered the country club dinner. The rehearsal dinner I wasn't invited to. The seat in the back row. He slid into the booth across from me. So what's up? Everything okay? Everything's fine. I wanted to give you your wedding gift. Mom, you didn't have to. I wanted to. I pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check and a letter. He opened the envelope and went very still. The check was for $500,000. Mom. His voice cracked. What is this? How did you? Read the letter, I said quietly. His hand shook as he unfolded it. Dear John. This is your wedding gift. It comes with no strings, no conditions, no expectations. But it also comes with information you should have had a long time ago. I am not poor. I have never been poor. For the last 40 years, I've worked as a senior financial consultant for high net worth clients. My net worth is approximately $55 million. I own 4 properties. I've endowed hospital wings, funded scholarships, and supported nonprofits across 3 states. I chose to live modestly. I chose not to tell you. I thought I was teaching you the value of money, the importance of making your own way, the danger of depending on wealth you didn't earn. I may have been wrong. Last month, I attended a dinner with Emily's parents. I dressed as though I were struggling financially. I wanted to see how they would treat someone they perceived as less than them. And I wanted to see if you would notice. You didn't. I watched them dismiss me. I watched them pity me. I watched them treat me like a charity case, like an embarrassment to be managed. And you let them. Not because you're cruel, but because you didn't see it. You were so grateful for their help, so eager to be accepted by their world, that you didn't notice your mother becoming invisible. This money is yours. Use it however you want. Pay off your loans. Buy a house. Invest it. I don't care. But I need you to understand something. Wealth doesn't make someone valuable. Poverty doesn't make someone worthless. And family, real family, doesn't make you earn your seat at the table. I love you. I always will. But I needed you to know who I really am. And I needed to know who you've become. Mom. The silence stretched for a long time. When John finally looked up, his face was white. You've been rich this whole time? Yes. The apartment, the car, everything was fake? Not fake. Simple. There's a difference. Why? His voice broke. Why would you lie to me? I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything. And I wanted to raise you without the burden of expectation, without trusting me. He slammed his hand on the table. People turned to look. You didn't trust me with the truth. John. Do you know what I've been through? The stress? The student loans? Working 3 jobs in college while you had millions? I wanted you to learn. Learn what? That my own mother didn't think I was worth being honest with? His pain was sharp and real, and it cut me. You're right, I said quietly. I should have told you. But John. I also needed you to see something. What? That you let Emily's family treat me like I was nothing. Not because I actually was nothing, but because you thought I couldn't offer you what they could. He opened his mouth. Closed it. That's not, I never. You did. You let them seat me in the back. You didn't invite me to the rehearsal dinner. You didn't ask me to give a toast at your wedding. You apologized for me to them, instead of defending me. I was trying to keep the peace. With them. Not with me. The words hung between us. John stared at the check. $500,000. More money than he'd probably imagined having for years. I don't want this, he said finally. Yes, you do. No. I don't. Not like this. He pushed the envelope back across the table. Not as some kind of test I failed. It's not a test. Not anymore. It's a gift. From someone I don't even know, apparently. That hurt more than I'd expected. You know me, I said. You've always known me. You just didn't know about the money. The money changes everything. Does it? I leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, the money only revealed what was already there. Your in-laws have money, and suddenly they matter more than I do. Not because they're better people, but because they can offer you something you think I can't. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's true. He sat back, jaw tight, eyes bright with unshed tears. What do you want from me? I want you to think about the man you're becoming. About whether you're making choices based on what matters, or based on who has the most to give you. I love Emily. I know you do. This isn't about her. Isn't it? He stood up abruptly. I need to go. John. I'll call you later. I need time. He left the envelope on the table and walked out. I sat alone in the booth for a long time. John didn't call later. He didn't call the next day, or the day after. A week passed. Then 2. I didn't chase him. I'd said what I needed to say. But the silence hurt more than I'd anticipated. Then, 3 weeks after the wedding, Emily called. Melissa? It's Emily. Can we talk? Of course. We met at a coffee shop. She looked tired, stressed. John told me, she said. About everything. I assumed he would. He's really hurt. Confused. Angry. I know. But he also. She hesitated. He's been thinking about things. About how my parents treated you. About how he treated you. I waited. I didn't realize, she said quietly. I thought you were. I mean, we assumed. She stopped, frustrated. I'm not making excuses. But I grew up in a world where everyone showed their success. Where money was visible. I didn't know how to read someone who lived differently. You read me as poor. And that made me less important. She flinched. Yes. And I'm sorry. Does John know you're here? No. He's processing. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. How we made you feel. And it was wrong. Thank you for saying that. My parents. She smiled bitterly. When I told them who you actually are, my mother almost fainted. My dad immediately started talking about investment opportunities. I'm not interested. I know. John told them that too. It was the first time I've ever heard him push back against them. Something warm flickered in my chest. How is he? I asked. Conflicted. Hurt. But also, thinking. Really thinking. She met my eyes. He loves you. He's just trying to figure out how to reconcile the mother he knew with this. The money doesn't change who I am. I know that now. I'm not sure he does yet. 2 months after the wedding, John called. Can I come over? Yes. He arrived that evening. We sat in my small kitchen, the one he'd grown up in, the one that suddenly felt different to him now that he knew what it represented. I've been thinking, he said. About everything you said. About Emily's parents, about the wedding, about me. Okay. You were right. About a lot of it. I was so caught up in being accepted by them that I didn't see how they were treating you. How I was letting them treat you. John. Let me finish. He took a breath. But you were also wrong. You say the money doesn't change who you are, but it does. Not your character, but your choices, your power, your options. And you kept that from me. Not to protect me, but because you didn't trust me with it. That's fair, I said quietly. I don't know if I can take the money. Not yet. It feels like. I don't know. Like accepting it means agreeing that I failed your test. It wasn't a test. It was, Mom. Maybe not intentionally, but it was. We sat in silence. What do you want? I asked finally. I want to know my mother. The real one. All of her. Not the version you thought I needed. Okay. And I want you to meet Emily again. Really meet her. Not the person she was at that dinner, but who she's trying to be now. I'd like that. And maybe. He smiled slightly. Maybe you could tell me about your work sometime. Your real work. Because I realized I've never actually asked. I'd like that too. Act 16, The Truth. 6 months later, things weren't perfect. But they were better. John and Emily had dinner with me once a week. I'd told John stories about my career, my investments, my philanthropic work. He'd listened with a mixture of awe and residual hurt. Emily had pulled back from her parents' financial support. She and John had declined the down payment offer, choosing instead to save on their own. It was slower. Harder. But theirs. I'd gone public with some of my charitable work, not all, but enough. The Riverside Women's Foundation had announced my decade of support. The Children's Hospital had invited me to join their board. Patricia Morrison had called 3 times. I hadn't called back. John still hadn't taken the check. It sat in my desk drawer, waiting. One evening, sitting in my kitchen with John and Emily, I said, I'm going to sell this apartment. They both looked up, startled. I've lived small for so long, I think I forgot it was a choice, I said. I'm going to buy a house. Something with a yard. A guest room. A real kitchen. That sounds nice, Emily said softly. Room for grandchildren someday, I added. When you're ready. No pressure. John reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, he said. For not seeing you. For not protecting you. I'm sorry too, I said. For not trusting you with the truth. Are we okay? He asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. We're getting there, I said. And for the first time in months, that felt like enough. The check sat in my drawer for another year. Then, on John's 30th birthday, he came to my new house, the one with the yard and the guest room, and asked if it was still available. The money, he said. Can I still have it? Of course. It's always been yours. I want to use it to start a business. Something of my own. Not connected to Emily's family, not dependent on anyone else. What kind of business? Financial consulting for first-generation college students. Kids from families like the one you pretended to be from. Help them understand money, build wealth, break cycles. I smiled. That sounds perfect. He took the check. And finally, I saw the man I'd hoped I'd raised. Not someone who valued money for what it could buy. But someone who understood what it could build. The end. Love without respect isn't love. It's a debt that never gets repaid. But respect, even when it comes late, can rebuild almost anything.